7:08 p.m. on Thursday, March 22nd, 2018. We're here in the Cardinal Room of the Upper Dublin High School, and I would like to call to order the Finance Committee meeting of the School District of Upper Dublin. My name is Amy Francek, and I'm going to be chairing tonight in place of Mrs. Good, who is excused. Tonight we have one presentation. We're going to welcome Arthur Gallagher and Company, represented by Ms. Christine Brown and Ms. Kristen Kotz, correct? Very good. Who will be providing a healthcare update. Take it away.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Christine Brown. I am the public entity team leader for our public sector practice out of our Radnor office. And with me is Kristen Kotz, who's a senior consultant on the team, as well as several other members that aren't here tonight, but we do have a lot of support. So thank you for your time. So for this evening, we will be going over the medical and prescription drug renewal history, medical trends, claims, and utilization review, prescription drug trends, claims, and utilization review, the Bucks and Montgomery County Schools Healthcare Consortium, and then future negotiation strategies. Feel free to stop us at any time with any questions that you may have.
So the first slide goes through a history of the medical and prescription drug renewal since the 2015-16 plan year. And what this slide provides is the school district's renewal, as well as the overall Bucks and Montgomery County Consortium renewal, and then national trend. So you can see the first year the medical received a reduction of 15%, which is obviously almost unheard of, while the RX received almost a 20% increase. So the total increase was negative 8%. 2016 plan year, the medical received a 15% increase and a negative 6% prescription decrease, resulting in a total increase of 8.9%. In the 17-18 plan year, there was 11% increase in medical, 11% in prescription, resulting in 11.29% increase overall. So we can see that our trends are kind of all over the place. It's not unheard of with healthcare, where there are obviously peaks and valleys, but this is a little bit. We have looked at the Bucks and Montgomery County, the schools that participate, and their renewals have been somewhat a little bit all over the place, so we have talked to them about that. When we take a look at national trend, it's around 7 or 8% overall the last couple of years. So in some cases we did better than that, in some cases we did worse. We're going to go through what the Bucks and Montgomery County Consortium is doing to try and stabilize the renewal increases year over year. But first, we're going to talk about just the medical claims overview from the last plan year compared to the 2 plan years prior. You can see from an overall perspective, the 2014-15 plan year was about $5 million overall, and that increased 15-16 to 5.7, and 16-17 increased to 6.5 million. So year over year, we've been seeing quite large increases on medical as a result of higher than norm utilization in some cases, and high claimant activity as well. When we take a look at the overall medical monthly paid claims, Upper Dublin is on a per member per month basis is at about $363. The consortium is about $361, and Aetna's book of business is about $339. We have several school districts that we represent, and I would say in the mid 300s is probably about average for the school districts. So you're a little bit above average from a medical per member per month basis. One of the things that we have been seeing in general are high catastrophic claim trends. So over the past couple of years, the stop-loss carriers, those are the carriers that protect high claimants, they have reported more high claimants that have exceeded $1 million. And in addition to that, they're seeing a larger quantity of claims as well. This is a result of a couple things. One is healthcare reform mandates. So a couple of years ago, healthcare reform mandated that all plans are unlimited. Prior to that, most plans had $1 million cap on them. which you probably weren't even aware of because the hospitals would stop billing at $1 million. We have one school district in Chester County that had a $7 million claim this year. So although they had stop-loss coverage to protect them, the stop-loss carrier then increases their fee the following year. So it has to be paid somewhere. So their costs have greatly increased from that one very large claimant. Another thing that has contributed to the high claimants are specialty drugs, which if you have sat through any of our presentations in the past, we've talked about because they are just so costly and they're getting more and more costly. It's not expected to stop. And again, we see these drugs oftentimes on commercials on TV, and we're just seeing more use of the drugs and more drugs coming out that are categorized as specialty drugs. And the specialty drugs in some cases can do wonderful things, but they come at a cost. The pharmaceutical companies are no longer investing in brand drugs. They're all investing in these specialty drugs because of the cost. Years ago, it was only, specialty drugs were only injectable drugs. Now they even come in pill format. So there's really not even a great definition for them except that they're high-costing drugs. Years ago, they used to only treat very specific conditions, and now the indications have expanded. So they're treating conditions such as high cholesterol. They're treating conditions like psoriasis. So we have to just, we've been talking to our clients about trying to protect the plan in the future because of these high costing drugs. We have one school district that has a spouse on the plan that every year the spouse costs $1 million that they're taking one drug year over year. And if they didn't have stop loss, they probably wouldn't be able to afford that. But again, they still have to pay that money up front and then get reimbursed. Also new technologies, as well as cancer diagnosis, the rising frequency of multiple newborns and the high cost of transplants. So all new technologies, and some of these things are really wonderful things, but again, they come at a cost. When we take a look at the district's high cost claimant year over year of over 100,000. The most recent plan year had 5 high costing claims that totaled over $1 million. The 2015-16 plan year was the worst from a high cost claimant perspective, with they had a total of 7 high claimants of about $1.2 million. And then the 14-15 year was about $1 million, a little less than $1 million for 5 claimants. So we've seen some districts that have much worse utilization and some that have much better, but what we're just seeing in general is more and more high claimant activity. Again, one result is because of the prescription drug. So when we take a look at prescription drug trends, this illustrates the prescription net payment per member per month since 2013. The RX net payment per member per month has increased by approximately 6% compared to the last plan year. When we take a look at Caremark, their school district book of business, they're at about 109.24. Right now we're at 120.42, so we're a little bit higher than the norm, but again, not outrageously high, where we do have some districts that are well above that average. This chart discusses specialty, and again, you probably are very familiar with specialty drugs by now, but they really range in price from anywhere from $10,000 to even over $1 million. Typically, less than 2% of members utilize it, but they account for 30% or more of the prescription drug payment. And over the next couple of years, that's expected to grow to 50%. There's going to be about 25 new specialty drugs that will receive approval in the next 5 years. To give you some perspective, in 1990, there were only 10 specialty drugs, and now there are over 300. In addition to that, as mentioned, they're expanding the conditions for these specialty drugs. So we always give the example of Humira. Humira was meant to treat arthritis, and you probably see commercials where they talk about it treating psoriasis. So that's, that drug is a couple $1,000s a month. If you members can now access that and get that medication for psoriasis when there may be a much less costly solution. So that's one example, and they're constantly reviewing the indications of these drugs and trying to expand them to, in some cases, to make money. So right now, the prescription drug accounts for about 30% of the overall medical and prescription drug trend. Over the next couple of years, pharmacy benefit managers expect that this move to about 50%. And unfortunately, it's not because the healthcare plan is decreasing in cost, but rather the healthcare plan is increasing, and also the pharmacy plan is increasing in cost at a more rapid rate than the medical. There are things being done on a federal level to try and control this cost, but as of right now, we haven't seen anything where it's really impacted, on a positive standpoint, it's really impacted any of the clients that we have.
I have a question about that. Would that be reflected in the premium rates that we see, or is that the total spend? So in other words, when I see 50-50 for the total drug spend, medical and pharmacy, does that mean the premium for medical is equivalent to the premium for pharmacy? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Because essentially the claims are the premium is supposed to cover the claims amount. So in the future, it's expected that the premium for medical and the premium for RX are going to be essentially the same. Years ago, we probably wouldn't even really focus on pharmacy that much. It was all about how to control the medical cost. And now it's really trying to get a handle on the pharmacy cost and what can we do to kind of curb that trend line in the future. So this gives you an example of your actual population here at the district. The prescription drug was about $2 million, but there are 21 specialty users that account for over 30% of the prescription drug cost. That's actually below the norm for CVS Caremark. CVS Caremark is about 38%. So even though to me that number is striking when you look at it, that 21 members are costing $650,000, that's actually below where the average is. But we always take a look at this because it's shocking to see that 21 members can be costing that much money. Another thing is that the specialty utilizers are currently paying less than 0.5% of the actual cost of the specialty drug under this plan. So a lot of what we've been talking about with districts is trying to change the prescription drug co-payments to get them more in line with the cost of actual prescription drugs. And that's hard because many members are used to paying very low costs for prescriptions. It's a big change. This gives you an idea of the top 25 drugs by cost, and the majority of them are specialty, but some of them are, like for example, Copaxone, that's for MS. So that's a medication we often see and we can expect to see on the top list. It's an expensive medication, but it's something that unfortunately it needs to be taken on an ongoing basis. But the first one, Stelara, is classified as a dermatologic. So perhaps this is something that there could be a lower costing equivalent that someone could take or at least try first. The cost per prescription for this particular drug is over $18,000. So members may not even have an understanding of how much these drugs cost because they only have to pay their copayment. So they may not even be aware of that. Another thing that was a little bit striking to us is the Acthar on here. Acthar recently went up in price very, very significantly. When it first came out, I think it was less than $1. Mm-hmm. And they found out that it can treat certain very specific conditions related to the flare-up of
adult exacerbations of MS.
Which obviously, if someone needs that is wonderful. But again, this comes at a high cost, and is the member trying everything first? We actually saw that this particular medication was being prescribed by some of our districts in a very, very close population from from a location perspective, so we weren't sure if there was maybe perhaps one doctor that was prescribing this medication on an ongoing basis. So we're going to talk about some programs that could potentially be put into place. They would have to be bargained, but could be put in place in the future that would help protect the plan from just getting a medication without having an authorization in first. We're going to move on to the Bucks and Montgomery County Healthcare Consortium. So the consortium is a joint labor and management self-funded consortium. I'm sure all of you are aware of the district participates. It began in 2011. It previously had 22 school entities with about 12,000 employees and 29,000 members. And when the district first joined the consortium, renewals were based on the district's own experience, and the district benefited from group purchasing power, lower admin fees, access to the consortium benefit consultant, and wellness. The consortium is moved to a common pooling approach last year, where they're starting to blend other districts' experience with the school district's experience. Over the next 3 years, the consortium is moving to blended rate actions. So this past year's renewal, it was a 67% district split, 33% consortium. Next year, it'll be 33% district, 67% consortium, and then in 2020 and beyond, they're expected to have a total blending of renewals. So they'll take everyone's claim experience. So that could be positive or negative, depending upon how everyone else's claim experience is running. The first look for the district was released at 9.38. The second look was at 5.89. And then this chart shows the third look. So from a standalone basis, the district would have been at an overall 6.16%, but with the blending, we're at 6.6%. So it's about even. It's about a wash this year with the blending, but we don't know what's going to happen in future years. So it's just one thing that we've been talking about with our districts, because some of the school districts have decided to leave the consortium, and some of them, if they have positive claim experience and they withdraw, we're concerned that there may only be negative claim experience left. So districts this year have until the end of March to provide their notice that they're leaving, and thus far 8 school entities have provided their withdrawal notice. The majority of the schools that have provided the withdrawal are smaller, but there is one large district that recently provided their withdrawal notice. So we may be receiving a 4th look renewal, and we will do an analysis on that as well.
So 8 of 22.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any districts that are looking to come into the program?
I don't believe so at this point in time. There has been a lot of changes that have gone on in the consortium over the last couple of years, and I think maybe that's what has prompted districts to look elsewhere.
Is there any penalty for a school district opt out?
Right now, there is no penalty in the contract. You just have to give a certain amount of notice. So right now, districts have until the end of March. And then, of course, they have to pay their run-out claims. So if they owe any deficit, or if by the end of this year, they'll do kind of a settle up and they have to pay out whatever's owed. So if their claims come in higher than their budget, they have to pay that when they leave.
Could they also jump back in anytime they want?
They have 2 years before they can jump back in, and it has to be board approved. So it's not something that they can just come back if they want.
Do you think they're forming their own consortium?
No, we know actually where a lot of them are going. Christine and I don't represent the consortium, but we work closely with a number of districts that participate, and half of them are going into CPAST and half of them are going to DIVIT. We wouldn't recommend DIVIT for a district like Upper Dublin because it's really meant for smaller groups. DIVIT combines both schools and municipalities' claims, and oftentimes you can't get claim information. CPAST is an option, and that's another consortium within the Bucks and Montgomery County. However, they have Independence Blue Cross and Express Scripts, where this consortium has Aetna and CVS, so it would be a change in carrier to move in that direction.
And if I could, just remind particularly experienced board members and inform the newer board members that are in the room. I was not going to say that. At one point, we were the only district that was split, I believe. No, actually, there was one other one. For RX, we were in CPAST, and for medical, we were in Bucksmont. But there became a problem or a concern that we could not buy stop-loss insurance for RX only, so we made the move over entirely to Bucksmont. So I will tell you, I'm not sure that our guest presenters are even aware, there was a call last Friday that Tom and I both spent time listening. I'm not on, a lot of the business administrators are not on the board for the consortium. So several of the business administrators had a lot of questions regarding what's the impact going to be, moving down the line, and again, our guest speakers are being very professional and appropriate, but one of the things that I was concerned about was when they dropped the stop loss to $25,000, how that would impact several districts. And I think you may remember me bringing that up at some meetings. So anyway, I'll get back to their presentation, but when you got all of their attention very quickly. And the other large school district, or there is one large school district that I'm familiar with, they can easily be self-insured. They have thousands of lives. So that one wasn't too much of a surprise. And when you're in on your own, you make your decisions much quicker than you do when you're in a consortium.
So the next section is future negotiation strategies. And just to follow up on the consortium, if it's something that the district is concerned about in the future, we can certainly look at other options. That typically is a long process, though, especially when a union's involved. But I think at this point, we kind of are everything has happened very quickly, and we're kind of waiting to see the impact. Thus far, the impact on the district has not been negative. It's been neutral. So moving forward, we can certainly monitor that on behalf of the district. So we put together some future negotiation strategies that we've been seeing some other districts begin to talk about. The spousal surcharge exclusion program. This is a challenging one, but a lot of districts have asked about it. It's common on the private sector side, but the public sector, it's not there yet. I think only 2 of over 20 districts have this currently in place. This is where you would either charge more for a spouse being covered under the plan, or you can actually completely exclude them. So healthcare reform says that you have to cover dependents up to age 26. The dependents can be married. They don't have to be living with you, but you don't have to cover your spouse. So I'm not married, so it doesn't bother me, but I'm sure some people are very opposed to that. But when we take a look at claims data, the spouses contribute a lot to high-costing claims. And the problem with spousal surcharge programs in a school district environment is you have to make the surcharge large enough where an employee and their spouse are really going to think about the other health care. So if I was married to someone at Upper Dublin, the surcharge would have to be very, very high for me to think about being on my own plan, because my plan, there's quite a large contribution that I have to pay just to be in my plan, and it doesn't compare at all to what the district is offering. So that's one of the reasons why this has been such a hurdle. So the districts that have implemented this, they really haven't seen any movement. And really what you want to do is not so much collect the surcharge, but get some spouses to move off the plan because of their negative claim experience. This kind of gives you the whole range of a spousal surcharge to a complete exclusion. And really all we've seen thus far is the partial spousal surcharge, which basically means if someone has coverage elsewhere, they have to pay more to be on the plan. And again, the recommended surcharge would be $100 to $200 a month, and we don't even know if that necessarily would be large enough to have movement off the plan. What we've seen thus far is about $50 a month, and that has not been enough to move spouses off the plan. The other option is what we would consider a spousal surcharge, where the spouse has to actually pay the COBRA rate, and that's quite high. it probably would not happen. But there would be movement off the plan if that were the case. Then there's the spousal eligibility requirement where spouses that have other group health coverage can enroll in the district's plan, but if they have other coverage, they have to enroll in their own plan as well, and then the district would be secondary. In most cases, I don't know if necessarily a spouse would do this because they would be paying the payroll deduction here and to their own insurance. The trouble with this is that the administration could be somewhat complex. You always have to think about the administration because if it's not easy to administer, it's probably not worth it. But we do think that some of these are going to start becoming more commonplace in school districts because of the cost of health care. And to maintain the cost of health care to be affordable and great benefits for the employee, we have to start potentially increasing the cost for the spouse. And the final slide is about the pharmacy benefit strategies. And this is what we are seeing many districts that are moving in this direction and have been able to implement these clinical programs. And we think they're pretty important. For the most part, the three clinical programs, prior authorization, step therapy, and drug quantity management, of those three, prior authorization is probably the most important. And that's where you put an authorization on expensive medications, sometimes medications that are meant to treat very severe conditions that maybe perhaps have very severe side effects. This is similar to an authorization you would receive on the medical side to get an MRI. A lot of times the authorization members don't even see it. It just takes place. If you're meant to get that medication, then you'll get the medication. But we can give you an example of a prior authorization for a hepatitis medication that came out that was over $60,000. In order for that hepatitis medication to work, you had to have a certain genotype. So the prior authorization would make sure that that member had the blood test to get that, to confirm that they had that genotype. So again, if you're meant to have the medication, you will get it through the authorization process. Step therapy we've seen implemented at some districts, but it's a little bit challenging to implement. This is where you try a lower costing equivalent first before you try a higher costing medication. And we probably see that last on the negotiation list of these clinical programs. We see prior authorization and drug quantity management, which is number 3, where quantities of medications are limited to FDA-approved guidelines. And we've talked about this in the past because I've brought up my own example of how I take migraine medication. And my doctor always says, I actually go to my primary care physician for this medicine. And every time I go there, he says, how many pills does your insurance company allow you? So if I'm taking a pill every single day, then I have a more severe problem that I need to be treated with. If I'm getting migraines every day, there's a problem. So our insurance allows for 9 pills a month. So this is basically what putting a limit on medications like that, putting a limit on opioids as well, pain medicine, sleep medication. So it's just putting a limit that would meet with FDA guidelines. Some other things that districts are starting to do is every single pharmacy benefit manager has a formulary. So they're starting to exclude medications from their formulary. And the reason that they're doing this is if they have 2 competing manufacturers, they contact one manufacturer and set up an arrangement where they get better discounts with them, and they exclude the opposite manufacturer. This is a little bit challenging for employees because there are medications that are just not covered, but there's always an alternative. And this does save money for the district. Along with that, there is a process in place if for some reason a member cannot take the alternative to go through, and if their doctor submits clinical documentation, then they're able to get the medicine that they need. And then the other thing that we're seeing is an implementation of 4th tier for just specialty drugs. So rather than having your standard 2 or 3 tier program, you have a separate tier where maybe it's $100 per month for your medication. We have one district that implemented a co-insurance with a maximum, so the member pays 30% of the cost of the drug to the maximum amount. And that has saved them money, but it's also got members thinking, can I take a lower costing medication? So that's something that we're starting to see as well. But if we were to recommend anything, the prior authorization and drug quantity management, that's something that kind of helps protect the plan moving forward. So you make sure that no member is getting a really high costing medication without it being authorized. And that is all we have. So we're here to answer any questions that you have.
Do members of the committee have any questions?
So you did get my attention with, with the warnings. I mean, what are you recommending now? Is this just keep monitoring the situation closely, or do you think we should consider leaving the consortium or joining a different consortium, which I know there's issues with because we, have to deal with our union, and they, we're in a management union plan.
I think it's challenging to leave the consortium when you're at this stage in the game for July 1. I do think that if the district wants us to explore other alternatives, we can do that, and it may take months. It may take until July 2019 to be able to make that move, because the union has to agree to this as well. And the one thing that's challenging is the Bucks and Montgomery County Consortium is a joint labor management trust. So they like the fact that they have a seat at the table, and there's really no other consortium in the area that operates in that manner. So that's what we've been running into. But if this has a negative impact on the district, then I would say that we should definitely look at alternatives moving forward, even if in the end it turns out that the consortium is the place to stay. At least you have peace of mind knowing that we've looked at every other option.
Is CPAS, are their first looks better than ours? Are there differences in terms of prices in the two consortiums and price increases they're looking at?
They're a different model, so the way that they operate is you're basically buying in for buying power. Your claims are your own claims, so they're not blended in any way. So it would be all how the district is running. And the main thing with moving to CPAS is to discuss with the union the fact that we're changing carriers, because employees don't like changing carriers. It would be moving from Aetna to IBC, so they may like that. I don't know, but the pharmacy vendor is also different as well. So again, that's why we don't think it would be a quick process. It would probably be something long term, but they operate very differently, where really all of your claims go to what the cost of your benefit is. So it's almost like being standalone, but you're still in that consortium for that protection of not having to pay the peaks and valleys of claims as they come in the door.
I'm not sure who exactly to address the question to. It might have come up on the conference call you were on. There is a pending CVS Aetna merger, and because the consortium is tied to those specific vendors, did they talk at all about the potential impact of that if it goes through?
As it stands right now, I don't think anyone really knows anything. What we believe may happen, because also Cigna just acquired Express Scripts, so we believe that they're trying to create kind of one-stop shops where, for Aetna and CVS, you can go into a CVS pharmacy right now and receive care, so we expect to see more of that. The difference is that Cigna purchased Express Scripts, and on the other end, CVS purchased Aetna, which is kind of unusual. So sometimes with all these acquisitions, it creates less competition, and it's not a great thing, but thus far, it hasn't changed anything.
Anybody else outside the committee? Mark? Mr. Sirota?
I wanted to make sure I'm right in this thinking, as might be a question for Brenda, I'm not sure. So my understanding is looking at all the future negotiation strategies in the document, things like the spousal surcharge is something that we could negotiate in our negotiation process with our associations. But things like the fourth tier for specialty drugs is something we can't negotiate, right? Wouldn't the consortium itself have to offer that before we could offer it?
My understanding is that we could negotiate that, and then there would be such a plan that would exist within the consortium.
So one consortium member can make that happen?
Right now, the pharmacy does not have preferred plans, only the medical does. So there are 3 moving to 4 preferred plans on the medical side. So it's very hard to negotiate on the medical side because all the plans are really close in value. So there's really not much room for improvement. But on the pharmacy side, as it stands right now, there are, I think, over 100 different plans.
Right, but aren't
So-
they working on consolidating that and forcing us all into this? shouldn't
I
say
know at one
forcing,
point
but-
they were working on consolidating that, but
Yeah.
I don't think they've gotten anywhere.
And that's the correct statement, that there's still discussion about that, but no one wants to give up their,
So at
and,
least at this time, it's conceivable to do that on our own.
Yes.
yes,
But if we wait too long, we may not be able to.
exactly.
Okay.
So, another question is, and I don't know, again, how this is structured. I think we've talked before about having a lower cost plan. That's not one of your options?
Right now, it can't be in the Bucks Montgomery County Consortium because they only have those preferred plans. There is one plan that they're implementing as of July. That's a lower costing value, but it still isn't, it's not where, it's not a qualified high deductible health plan, but it is a lower valued plan that could be introduced in the future.
And in fact, we are actually using it in negotiations with the support staff right now. But it's actuarial valuation, its AV is still pretty high, so.
I mean, I would love to have that plan, but I know that right now they're used to very, very high AVs, so.
All right, seeing no other comments, oh, sorry, Mr. Robsky, I'm sorry.
When does a specialty drug go down to a brand name drug and then go down to a generic drug?
Typically, it won't go to a brand name drug. Sometimes specialty now will be a specialty generic, but specialty generics are still thousands of dollars. So once a specialty is a specialty, it's a specialty drug. The pharmacy benefit managers do review their formulary on an ongoing basis, but there's something in the process when someone makes a drug that it has to qualify as specialty, and then it would continue. And some of the patents don't run out for 20-plus years. So then it won't even be a generic for a very, very long time. We know that there are a lot of drugs out there that are high costing, but we're also concerned about future drugs that could come out and what the cost may be.
Okay, apologies, Mr. Robsky. Seeing no other comments or questions, I want to thank Ms. Brown and Ms. Kotz for your presentation. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And now moving on, Ms. Bray, are there any announcements?
Not this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 3 items for the committee. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the minutes. There are minutes.
From,
and
also
they're-
from February 22nd, and
Yes.
everyone can view those and make adjustments or suggestions. And thank you both. I'll be chatting with you, I'm sure.
And now we have 3 items under the committee reports and recommendations. Ms. Bray, if you could talk to us a bit about the transfer funds.
At this time, we're proposing that we transfer, we refer to it as the debt fallout off in order to continue to build capacity for Sandy Run. We've been transferring $1,458,669 for the last 3 years into the capital projects from the general fund. And then you may not recall, but last January of 2017, we did a bond refunding. And for this year, there were savings from that general obligation bond refunding of $279,514 for the current year. So instead of losing that, so to speak, in this year's budget, we had planned all along to transfer that into, again, capital reserve. So to remind everyone, last October and November, we transferred, or the board approved a transfer of $1.5 million due to the fund balance on June 30th of 2017 of $11 million. That transfer took place, and now we're recommending another $1,738,183. This will not be the last recommended transfer for the year. If things remain quiet, there would be a recommendation of transferring the $250,000 budgetary reserve probably right at June, right at the end of the year. And we will continue to monitor one-time revenues that are coming in. But right now, I can't think of anything any additional transfers.
Any comments or questions from the board? And we'll be moving this on to the legislative agenda for April the 9th. Is that correct?
That is correct,
Okay.
with your approval.
Yes. With committee. Do you approve? Excellent. Then we will be moving it on to April 9th. If you could go on then to item B.
Budgetary transfers, approximately $700,000, to be precise, $692,250 of budgetary transfers are being recommended for approval on April the 9th. Transfers are necessary to comply with 687 of the Pennsylvania School Code. They do conform to best practice. Usually, we still continue in Upper Dublin to transfer the bulk of the money after the audit, but we continue to strive to have those more periodically throughout the year.
Anybody comments? Committee members, are you comfortable moving this forward to the legislative meeting in April? Very good. And item C, please, Ms. Ray.
I'll go to the podium. Okay, Brooke, can you help me out here? It's really big.
See if I can.
Good.
Thursday, umbrellas, frozen, rose, and column. Gosh. I mean, everyone has paper, so that's good.
I think we'll get it.
Oh, that's strange. What is it again?
We're getting there.
Okay, thank you. Got it. Little more?
Well, these are awfully. Let me see what comes up on.
Oh,
That'll be okay.
yeah.
Can we close this down at all up there?
This whole thing?
Yeah. Can we do, if we hit that? No. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Thank you for the technical help, Mr. Sirota, as well. I will figure out Google. I will. Anyway. Okay, thank you. Tonight, we're going over approximately 67% of the budget. Last month, we looked at actually more functions, I believe, but a smaller percentage of the budget. And the first function, regular programs, or 1100 function, is the largest single function in our budget of about $45 million. I'm not going to spend too much time on this particular page, although we should look at the fact that just take a look at some of the revenues that we have down below to offset or to help out with that $45 million. We have basic ed funding of only $2.9 million budgeted for next year. This year, we had budgeted 2.8, $142,000. That's the Ready to Learn grant, and Titles 1, 2, 3, and 4. You will note that there's some nice increases in those numbers. I know when we talked about the variance of budget to actual last year, that this was one of the areas where we had about $250,000 with access positive as far as our title allocations. So looking at the detail, jumping to 1,200. There we are. Administrators, we have.
Brenda, can I,
Of
you
course.
didn't cover the info slide. I just had a question on the info slide. Because we're
Okay.
showing 1.0 Robbins Park Director. Is that correct? Should that be a half? What did we do with the Robbins Park position? Isn't it 50/50? Or do we still
No.
consider her one?
She's at 1.
Okay, so, okay, I thought we do half the time now at Robbins Park. But-
She is at Robbins Park a reduced period of time. I guess
Okay.
perhaps we could do the allocation, because she is spending some time in class.
Correct.
But it's all 1,100 function, it's all regular ed function.
Right, but just in the info, we say 1.0 Robbins Park Director, that's all I'm questioning. Okay.
We can look into it and really drill it down. I think she only teaches one class, so.
She teaches two.
Does she teach
environmental
two
science,
this year?
yes.
So we could make a change to that allocation. Thank you. I didn't realize that. We have 7.0 curriculum coordinators. Please note that world language is currently not filled. And also, Ms. Baldessano put it in there an informational, 40% of the coordinator's salary is charged to a function, the object down below of 121, which is where they spend their time teaching in class. So under 121, professional staff, we have 257 or 256.7 FTEs. You heard me speak last month about we're using software. It's called Position Control. So last year we were counting bodies, so to speak. This year, because some of our employees work in multiple functions or different areas, we're using FTEs. Obviously, we don't have 0.7 of a person, but because of the partial FTEs, they roll into that. The 121 includes 4 new elementary positions, and we also include in that line non-teaching duties such as mentoring, bus duty, those type of items, and includes salary expense for long-term subs. We do have most of our substitutes or per day, per diem subs are under 300s because they're not paid through payroll.
Question?
Yes.
I know when we've been looking at enrollment, there might be a possibility of a reduction needed in some of the classes in some of the elementary schools. But at the moment, we're estimating staff as is and 4 new positions.
Correct. Those changes would come most likely in May, as we get closer to the end of the year in staffing.
Okay.
And hopefully, there's also no, just to remind everyone, we have no retirements at this point in time either.
Okay.
So if there are any of those will be reflected at a later point. And probably not, the detail we won't be going over the detail. You'll be told about those at a legislative meeting more likely, and just as an overall view. So personnel control software, and Jen has it in here, implemented fall of 2017, which created some changes with employee budget codes, and budget includes salary increases for all the staff, that is steps for the teachers, and for the support staff according to the contract. Health waivers, you see we have 126 professional staff receive health waivers of, I believe it's $2,016 a year. That's calculated out, and 196 support staff members also receive that are in 1,100 function.
I have a question.
But we don't have 196 support staff receiving the waivers.
I'm curious why, it's a small number, but why are you budgeting so much more for support staff waivers next year compared to this year?
We're in negotiations right now, Mr. Sirota. How did you pick up on that one? Fringe benefits. Delta, we have Delta Dental, we have life insurance, disability insurance, vision, but obviously where we really get into the money is also Social Security. Peaser's retirement going from 32.57 to 33.43. you know, it's $800,000 in this function alone as far as an increase in retirement, PSERS. We just discussed, or the two guest presenters, medical insurance and prescription expense. The amounts that are in here right now do not reflect the second or the third look decreases. Once we get the fourth look, we'll make the total change, usually probably in 1,100 instead of just trying to spread it out to all the various functions. But that will be a nice decrease, and what we've calculated the savings based on now the third look is approximately $325,000 across all areas of the budget. But definitely a nice step in the right direction. Professional services, contracted services for substitute teachers, instructional and educational aides paid through STS Incorporated. We're going to be changing that company, but nevertheless, it's still going to be a 300 object. Change in Title II funding of $67,000 from salaries to professional services. So that's the reason you see that amount. We budgeted $397,000 this year, and it's jumping to over $500,000. It's how we need to spend the title money. And then there's also new funding of $10,000 for 17-18 Title IV. Nothing to, you know, the equipment repairs and copier services. I believe that next year will be the third year of our Toshiba contract. Postage for school mailings, tuition remains flat. Tuition for regular ed and charter school students. Now I'm going to stop there for a moment. There's a lot happening at the state level regarding the calculation. We've had something called PDE 363 since the beginning of time as far as charter schools are concerned. PDE announced that they're no longer going to calculate or check on us or have really anything to do with charter school tuition. That gives me pause because I think we'll have a lot of issues that we're going to need to deal with. Fortunately, in Upper Dublin, we only, I think 200,000 is the maximum amount of tuition we've had since I've been here. It varies from 175,000 to 200, maybe 220 at one point. We're very fortunate compared to other school districts, but we're putting that amount in there and leaving that with the assumption there's not going to be any big surprises for next year. Equipment, the reason why you see that jumping from $24,000, it's an adjusting entry made from Chromebook lease proceeds. Revenue is posted to offset this. It's a grossing up of an accounting step that we have to do. Annual fees, cost of membership dues and or fees, PSAT and the AP fees are coded to this function for 17-18. They used to be, will be, for 17-18 and 18 and 19. They used to be coded to 3,200. I think that was about 2 hours, right to the minute. Okay, this is going to get more awkward. Any questions over this huge function within our budget? Moving on to the 1200s, I will remind everyone that just do it this way. Mrs. Clegg spoke to us in November about most everything that's contained within the 1200s. Once again, we have revenue generated, and we'll see that on the next, on the summary as well, where we see the numbers. Relatively small considering how much we spend. We spend $13 million, and the special education subsidy is less than 2. We may be fortunate, it may be a little bit more than 2, because Mrs. Clegg does an excellent job at filing requests for extraordinary reimbursement, and we've been successful with that for the last few years. Thank you. Other areas that are used to offset or help pay for special education, IDEA, and tuition from other LEAs, that's for classes that are mainstream within our district, special education, the subsidy I was just talking about of $1.8 million, access funds. Last year was extremely high because we were able to pull down some funds from the previous years. Notice that in 2015-16 it was zero, so last year was particularly successful in access, and we're budgeting estimate for this year and for next of approximately $125,000, again, of revenue to offset.
Will that number go up in 17, 18? Could it possibly get more than the 60? Or are we done getting?
I think we didn't we budget 125 for estimated revenue for this year?
Right.
Right.
The 60,000 was based on one counselor contracted with,
No, that's expenditure.
Lakeside.
Okay.
Now we're using 2 counselors, so that's why we can claim more expenses and draw down more funds.
Thank you. Looking at the detail, again, looking at FTEs, 2 special ed supervisors, we can all put down the names with that, the numbers that are on there. Speech teachers, 38.2 special education teachers, 3.5 gifted teachers, behavior specialists, OTs, instructional assistants, 55.3. This budget line of $6.9 million includes the salary and step movement that we would anticipate for the professional staff. Fringe benefits, again, it's all of the various line items that we went through on for the 1100 function, medical insurance, PSERS, and as well as FICA. Again, PSERS is the largest piece.
The salaries, it's about a 10% increase, right? I know we had a long time psychologist, is no longer with the district. I'm just surprised that did we bring in an additional staff person on this list, or is it seems, it went from 6.3 to 6.9.
9.
It's not just salary increases, it would be any additional work that they do as well. That would be included in this number. Also, a long-term sub that may fill in, but they also get paid for additional, like IEP writing, additional duties as well. So it's not just strictly salaries that's in the number. I mean, it's salaries, but it's also their additional work.
And we can look into that and dig to come back, and I'll explain that at the April 9th
And
meeting.
some of the change, too, has to do with position control as well. There was a lot of changes once Virginia and I dug into the teachers of where they were located and what to be charged to. So there might be some change in that as well, but
I know, it's frustrating, but we do, PD makes changes in what we can use account codes for, and then we also are using the software more. Remember, just a few years ago, we were still doing all of this on an Excel spreadsheet, so it takes a while to really embrace and use the software for its capabilities. But we'll do some looking into that to dig and see if there's anything else. And what actually, another question is, our estimate for the current year is higher by about $100,000. So that probably it's explained by the fact we've reclassified someone's position. You will note too that depending upon how, again, going to a per diem sub rate, you'll notice under the 300s that we've got about a $40,000, but yet $100,000 from year to year increase under professional services. That's STS, contracted services, first teacher substitutes, as well as special education substitutes. If we have a long-term sub that's on salary, that can also be part of the explanation underneath the 1200s. When we have teachers that go out, when we pay them as a long-term sub, it's a salary line. If it's a per diem rate, it's under the 300s. Again, copier expense, if we're ready to continue. Copier expense is relatively minor for special education. Other purchase services, charter schools, because yes, we do have charter schools expense for special education children, believe it or not. And we have also the private schools and approved private schools that fit the IEP and the needs of our children. Cost of books, software used in special education, again, based on Mrs. Clegg's presentation. Although for the current year, you will see that we're under, which is good, will contribute to fund balance. And equipment, we did some purchasing this year, but not anticipating at that level for next year, only $10,000. Now we get into an area that has a lot of sub-functions to it. And we will take just a minute because 2300 covers, again, many sub-functions from board services, tax collection services, negotiation, legal fees, superintendent services, community services, principals, and 2390 other administrative services. One of those new functions that we're having to deal with from the PDE level. Looking at 2300 overall, you will see about a $300,000 increase, just looking at the summary and the graphs below showing how that is spent. But since we cover so many areas, different functions, let's get right to the function. Notice this very attractive group of people that we have in the photograph. This is for the board. The Board of School Directors, and as you all know, is a 9-member political body elected by the residents. 2310 summary. There's really not a good deal of money that is allocated to the board, about $157,000 this year, and the reason why that's higher this year than is last year or what's projected for the future year really has to do with the equipment that was purchased for this room. Part of what we did in upgrading supports the board, so that $32,250 was charged to the board expense. You may recall that we had initially budgeted last year $59,000, so we were able to greatly improve that expenditure. We'll go to the detail for other services. It's general liability insurance for the board, employee practices, and those type of fees is the largest item. Advertising for all the board and committee meetings as required by school code, and some, but it's minor, travel reimbursements. Supplies, software fees, very minor, again, the $32,250. And lastly, in 800 dues and fees, it's what we pay to the Pennsylvania School Board Association, approximately $15,000. I've heard recently, although we have not put it in here, that there may be some interest in joining again the National School Boards Association. And SBA was, we were members once upon a time. We cut that when we were cutting a lot of expenses. But that's not included yet, but it's a relatively minor amount that can be added in, and we'll subtract it out most likely someplace else. Okay, Jen, I don't know why taxes likes to be over on the right-hand side. It doesn't like me whenever I put it back.
Is board docs under 2310, or is that somewhere else?
I think that's the fee under 20. Oh.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe that should be under the board, Jen. Board docs.
Well, it can be moved.
It can be moved. And it wouldn't even take board approval to move it because it's within the
True.
same function. So we can move that. The expense of collecting taxes is included in the 2330 function. Now, we think of taxes as real estate because if you recall, that is the largest revenue item in our budget. But it's not only for real estate taxes, it's the tax collector's salary, the printing and mailing of the tax bills, but it's also associated with collecting the delinquent real estate taxes, transfer taxes, and earned income taxes. And we'll get more into that when we get to the detail. This particular function doesn't vary a great deal. Purchase professional services, we'll look at that a little bit in depth. You'll note that the tax collector's salary is going down next year. That was because of the package that was offered over a year ago, last February. We finalized that. Fringe benefits, the only only amount is Social Security. The tax collector, elected tax collector, is not eligible for PSERS. Professional services, tax collector services for additional contracted help as part of the contract, again, what we cover. Delinquent real estate taxes, the commission rates, transfer tax of 2% needs to be charged here, and the EIT collection rate of 1.2% of the revenue. All are charged here. So obviously, as collections go up in each of those areas, the related expense also increases. So while the 1.2% of EIT, I believe, is actually down from what it was initially, although this year in 2017, 18, and 18 and 19 will remain the same. Bonding, the elected tax collector, of course, has to have a bond, and we spread that out over 4 years. The board does approve that. Then also under the 500, we have the printing of and the mailing of the tax bills. Supplies is relatively minor, no equipment, nothing for dues and fees for this particular function. Moving on to legal fees. Most everything, we have some negotiation services, a relatively minor amount this year, and then the legal services for our solicitor. These are charged in the 2350, and we've summarized them together. Jen has. There's just one line item, and as you can imagine, we do more detail in Upper Dublin for the legal fees, other legal fees, and then we break them out by retainer and legal fees. And then there's also, we do special education and legal fees for assessment appeals, which was mentioned actually earlier. Accountants fees, bond refunding, high school and Plan Con J submission this year. That's the reason why we're at 27,091. We had to have a Plan Con audit, which was $2,500, and then we also had to pay for an independent audit at the Plan Con audit, even though all the figures had been audited every year that we had spent the money. But that needed to be done before we could submit things to Plan Con. Good, this one stayed in place. 2360, the superintendent's services. We have a nice photograph of Dr. Wheeler with students. It includes the salary and benefits of the superintendent and the administrative assistants. It also includes expenditures for conferences, travel, supplies, softwares. And there's some other information in there.
The picture for all of us
Yes?
is over, which is really bizarre.
You mean the 2310?
With Dr. Wheeler, that picture is over to the right for us, and it's position.
It's fine, and it's been over to the right. Jen corrected it.
Oh, you just moved back. Okay.
Okay. Let's keep moving with the numbers. Again, salary is for the superintendent and administrative assistant, fringe benefits, all of those that are in every category with the exception of the tax collector tonight. Purchase professional services. This year, we have the Communication Solution Group, District Communication Service. You'll notice a decrease for next year because we plan to have a position that is in 2370, another difference that we need to address. Also this year, we are paying BCIU to help guide us through the comprehensive planning services, and CC, Chester County IU, is assisting us with the superintendent search services. The reason why this year is higher than certainly what we budget for the future. And last year was $65,000 because of the amount that we have, the contract we have with Communication Solutions. Purchase property services, a copier, printer, minor. Postage, printing for newsletter, annual report, travel, mileage reimbursement. Most of that really is the printing of the newsletter and the mailing. The others are minor. Software for board docs, there it is. Thank you, Ms. Baldessano. We'll put that over in the board section. Office supplies, books, and those type of things, about $20,000. Equipment, we're budgeting for some purchases for next year, and dues and fees. We budgeted the last 2 years for $10,000. Please note that we're only anticipating about $6,900. Assuming no questions, we'll go on to 2370, the community relations function, salary and benefits of facilities and community affairs. But it really has to do with services or the facilities that we provide for the public. And there's a list there of areas that are frequently used by members of the public. And the note down at the bottom, new for 1819, will be the addition of a communication specialist, salaries and benefits. Approximately the amount of money we're anticipating for next year is $400,000. Primarily because of the jump in salaries for the position we just named and the related benefits as best we can estimate. And following is the detail. Again, it does include the salary for facilities and community affairs manager as well, audio-visual support and production specialist. That's the individual who is recording and making sure that our YouTube videos are posted for the community meetings. And that's really all there is for 2370. On 2380, we're going to see some larger numbers because it has to do with principal services. A nice description. We had to do some comparing and contrasting back with the detail because we have 2 assistant principals and 4 secretaries at the middle school, and the high school has a principal and associate principal and 2 assistant principals and 4 secretaries. So while we had the detail correct, we needed to make sure that the front page reflected the same thing. The amount of money, it's not varying much year from year to year. We budgeted almost $3.5 million for the current year. We think we'll be spending about 3.4, and next year is slightly over 3.5. But let's look at the detail for 2380. Again, listing each one of those 4 elementary principals, 1 assistant elementary principal, and everything's listed down. There have been no PDE changes in this particular area. Secretaries are also listed, the salaries for those, although there is that dreaded note, one secretary used to be charged to 2380, is now charged to 2120, which you may recall I reported on last month, and it was a high school individual. Budget includes salary increases for all staff substitutes and health waivers. Fringe benefits, the same detail as for 1100. So you see the totals as was reported earlier. By far, the largest expense here is really salary and benefits. That's basically it. 2390, this is one of those PDE changes. I guess someone wants to know how much every school district spends essentially on graduation. At least we haven't figured out any other fees that should be charged in here. But it says other administrative services which cannot be classified elsewhere in the 2300 section series of functions is charged at 2390. Per the PDE, chart of accounts manual, graduation expenses are now charged to the 2390. This was updated for the current year. I always wonder what causes them to change that. As you can see, the expense, Jen had to go and pull it out of 3200s probably was where most of it was, and pull it into 2390 for expenses for last year, but it's approximately $9,500. Security, rental of sound system, tables, chairs for graduation, and the printing of the commencement. And we even have in there, we get so granular as the diploma printing and the flowers that we sit at the front of the stage. So now we'll get into something of a little more substance. Transportation. Transportation is one of those areas where we also have a revenue item or a subsidy, and it's actually reimbursement is what I should call it, but it's based on an index and the amount of money that's spent the previous year. We currently transport about 3,400 students to the 6 schools. Another change we caught, we used to have 7 when we had the villa, so we're down to 6, and 35 private non-public schools, and we have a fleet of 40 buses, 39 drivers, but 40 buses, 1 as a spare, and 8 vans. So the School District of Upper Dublin, as I spoke about in operations earlier, we have partner with School District of Springfield Township. One of the big advantages we receive is we don't have a tank for diesel. And once upon a time, our buses were buying diesel at retail spots. Of course, we didn't have to pay all of the taxes like companies do, but nonetheless, this way we were able to participate in the Montgomery County IU annual bid. Overall, you will see that we have budgeted last year of 3.288, almost, or excuse me, 4.3 almost. We're at 4.2, we think, as far as an estimate, and next year we're anticipating being up again to 4.3, and you'll see in just a moment the reason for that variation, although I think most everyone here is familiar enough to understand the changes. We have the transportation subsidy. We're budgeting next year the same as this year. Looking at the detail, Director of Transportation, we budgeted $91,000, but we've really been without a transportation director for most of the year. Christopher Robbins was scheduled to start on April the 16th. He'll actually be in district on April the 2nd. And but we have spent money. We've allocated what we're going to pay Chris for the rest of this year. And remember, Mr. Stover was in, and we paid him salary, not Peasers on his, because we got a special dispensation from Peasers as a contractor for us. So that's why it's $55,000, and then next year we have the amount in there for his salary. Transportation secretary, transportation manager. We have 2 mechanics. We have 39 drivers and subs. Wish we had more subs. And 3 bus aides currently. And it includes substitutes, overtime, and salary increases. So it can be a little bit tricky calculating all the overtime and extra time, extra hours. A lot of times bus drivers don't reach overtime because it takes 40 hours a week, but there's extra hours. And so we try to calculate those. And when you have a very successful team and you're in postseason play, there's additional costs related to transporting those successful teams. And because we don't always have the drivers or the equipment, we also need to contract. And we went out this year, last 2 years, we've solicited quotes for those times when we can't have our own drivers. We don't have the equipment or the bodies, the drivers, to take our students everywhere. And so that amount is down underneath the 300 function. And we have drug testing down in that object as well. We have software, the joint services agreement, which I am anticipating to come in at least $10,000 less than the current year for the next year, are all listed here. We have purchase property services, and by far the largest item is the 441, which is the land and building rental for the garage, the lot, trailer, and steps. Going up to $425,000 is the budgeted amount for next year. Remember, it's not just what we pay for the rent, it's reimbursement for a lot of the items, the insurance and taxes, the other costs related to the property. That's why that is so high. And then, of course, the lot and the trailer. We don't have anything budgeted for buying buses in the general fund. That's those purchases come out of capital, but I'm trying to get down and talk at the same time regarding the equipment. This year we did buy 2 vans. Those have been charged to the general fund this year, partly because we knew we weren't going to have the expense of a director. We could always, and I did not make any plans that we would make such an expenditure out of next year's, that if we need additional vans, we probably will. We can discuss it next year if we wanted to take those out of the general fund if we're having a good year, or if we want to take those out of capital. Vans tend not to last as long as buses, but we do have some flexibility in that area. So next year we're looking at 4.35 at this point. 3,200, speaking of transporting athletes. Last year, this photograph was our football team. This year, it is our Upper Dublin basketball team. Unfortunately, it's CB West and not CB South, who will be playing next week. But nonetheless. And really, student activities is not just student athletics, although that's the photograph that we have here. It is student activities. They're both athletic, the clubs, the non-athletic, programs in the middle school, and actually some activities that take place at the elementary school too. It also needs to cover coaches, sponsors, game officials, and the attendance of the various programs and teams. Summary. Whoops, I jumped right to detail. Actual, the budget for this year is 1.36, almost 1.37. We're anticipating that we are going to go over that amount this year. And next year, we're budgeting at about the same as this year at 1.4. You'll note that our actual expenditures in 16-17, it was 1.4 that year. We were just didn't estimate as well for the current year's budget as perhaps we should have.
Just a quick question. Why is under supplies, why did we go that much over budget?
Supplies. For the current year?
Yeah, the 600.
Is that band uniforms? Do we buy them this year?
No, they're actually in next year, although
okay.
that's one of the questions.
That's the next line.
When we,
Oh, yeah.
sorry. And that is a separate line item. Jen, can you help with the supplies off the top of your head? I didn't make a note on that
Yeah,
one.
do you mean going from the estimate to next year's budget of the
No,
59,000?
no, this year,
This year's
67.5 to 97,177. And I think we actually talked about this, and I didn't make a note because I thought I would
Oh,
remember.
why, that it went higher?
Yes.
I know, we had purchased a lot of helmets for football and lacrosse that really ran up the cost.
Oh, actually,
And there was a lot for the
it-
football padding too,
lacrosse, I think, was one of
yeah.
the big things. There's been a lot of very stringent guidelines regarding football helmets for a number of years. You need to send them out to be reconditioned, and you'll actually see that in the detail. We needed to replace some, and then they started implementing the same expectations or standards for lacrosse. And that makes sense. I mean, I see the accident forms and the concussions and all of that, so it's a dangerous, I shouldn't say dangerous, it's a sport filled with a lot of contact.
So is that increase?
How's that sound?
Is that 30,000, was that a one-time catch-up thing? Because we're going back down to 59.
Actually, this is probably one of the best places to take a look and a step back. Through the years, the last few years, our budget process has become, and we've had more budget writers, as Dr. Wheeler likes to refer to them, and we've had people become, administrators become more involved. And we've seen that result of that at this committee level with people reporting their budgets. This year, and actually it started last summer, building principals were challenged to help come up with a per pupil allocation, which is what most happens in most districts. And I'm looking at, some of the audience here who may have heard of that. We've never really had that. So in the past, a smaller elementary school, an elementary school with fewer students was still getting the same building allocation at the elementary level. So they worked together, the elementary principals worked together and came up with, actually Dr. Miner did a great job helping facilitate that. And so they came up with a per pupil allocation, and we've actually driven out the building budgets based on that for next year. Will it be perfect the first year? Absolutely not. So we'll have some growth and some changes. The middle school, actually, when I started doing comparisons with districts around us, was a little bit low. And so we'll be receiving a little bit larger allocation next year based on projected enrollment. The high school, on the other hand, really had a very large budget when I compared it to anybody in Montgomery County or larger schools or schools in Bucks County. So what you're seeing there, Mr. Sirota, is part of a reduction. It's going to be a challenge with the high school next year of trying to meet the new per pupil allocation, but it'll be something to work with. So, excellent question. There's actually some of that in the 1100s. It's just because those numbers are so large, you just don't see it as much as when you're in the 3200s and it's smaller.
But somewhere you listed what those allocations are.
I'm sorry?
Somewhere in here, I remember seeing the allocations. 200, 2.25, 350
Well,
per kid. I think I saw something like that.
it wasn't 350. I think we went with
200 for the elementary?
it was
Is that right?
200 for the elementary. I remember that.
225,
I think it
for
was
middle
230 actually for the
230.
235 for the middle school,
235, and then the high school?
350.
350.
Yeah, okay.
That was close.
And that's still a reduction in the high school budget.
And it's an increase for the middle school, which I thought was interesting.
Yes.
200, 235, and it's still an increase
Correct.
per student.
But, there's more groups, more activities, and everything else at the high school. So we'll see how that goes.
Out of curiosity, is that the entirety of it, or is there some flat amount per building plus that, or is it just, that's the only allocation they get?
That's the only allocation.
Okay, thanks.
And, Mr. Sirota, you bring up, that can be done, and I've done it in my career in different ways. So please note, under the dues and fees, again, we see a change in coding. I spoke of this in the 1100s, the 800s increased. Fees for the AP and PSAT fees moved from 3200s to 1100s. So that is the change. And we're still expecting approximately $1.4 million, again, in this part of our budget. Questions? Because the last summary really is only something that Jen and I are interested in. It's our verification sheet to make sure everything is okay.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Well, I'm not seeing, Dr. Ludwig, okay?
No.
I
I asked them as we went along.
Okay.
I had one thing I miss is the percentages. We used to have percent increases throughout the budget to expenditures, and I don't see that anymore. If you think about, like when I said I thought I saw a 10% increase, we used to see the percentages all the time.
Well, we did that with the board presentation.
And we'll be doing that on April the 9th at the legislative. We went through percentages by function.
Okay.
I mean, the idea was to get away from the old way of just looking at the percentages and the dollar increases and trying to get much more information into it, such as the number of FTEs and descriptions. So, and we will discuss, again, the percentages and dollar amounts on April at the
Right,
legislative meeting.
Yeah, legislative meeting.
I guess I could sit down or finish from up here, but what we would plan to do, according to the timeline, at our April 19th meeting, we'll be discussing revenue, trying to get a sense of where we want to be as far as any increase, because right now we have a 2.4% increase, tax increase baked into the revenue budget. There's also going to receive some good news. In the grand scheme of things, it's not that much money, but nevertheless, we need to put it in there. EIT received an email from Berkheimer that we're anticipating a $40,000 increase due to two large payments that they received this month. So, and we'll be looking at some other expenses. We will also try, Jen will have taken out our medical for the second and the third. Will not be allocated through all of the functions, as I stated. So we will see some top side. If we have any retirements by then, which I doubt, they'll be reported.
I'm just extremely, I'm concerned about that fourth look that Gallagher was talking about because of the exit of the, how many? 8?
8.
Yeah, and I think we really need to know when they anticipate getting us a fourth look. I mean, that's significant.
It's significant, but again, one of the large districts that left is Central Bucks.
Right.
They were not in for prescription drug anyway.
Okay.
They had a plan when I worked for CB 25 years ago that they still are maintaining, or an exclusive vendor. I'm not too certain that that one will really hurt us that much, but some of the other districts that left are the ones that had the better experience. So, but I think that they'll be small enough, and some of them are really only 50 lives. I'm not, and you know that I'm conservative. If I was really concerned, I would be up here beating the drum saying I don't really want to take out that money yet. But they gave us some assurances, at least for the current year, that there shouldn't be too much of a wiggle for the fourth look.
Currently in the budget, we're using the first look.
That is correct.
Which was what? Well, how much?
I think we used.
But the second and third look went down
Correct.
each time. Okay.
Although, Mr. Sirota, don't pay attention to the blended rate that they used in there, because right now we are still using our standalone rates.
Okay.
They're not using blended for their budgeting. They're trying to get us used to thinking in that way.
So at what point will you update benefits, health benefits?
We'll have it for April the 9th.
Okay,
And hopefully
using,
not
using,
after the
bucket.
third.
using the third.
Yeah, right now, there's 13% for medical,
Right.
flat for prescription
Right.
in the budget.
And the third look,
Was, I think, 12.9,
oh,
no, I'm sorry. I don't want to quote.
11.41 for medical and decrease of 7.96 for prescription.
Yeah, prescription really decreased. Although it's 7% of a smaller number, certainly of about $2 million, but nevertheless, it is a decrease.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Bray. It's time for community input. Ms. Vitella. It's up to you.
Sure, right. I just had a couple questions as I was writing notes. The 4 full-time, oh my gosh, and I just had my hands on them, so I would be very clever up here. There are 4 new elementary student or teaching positions. I'm just curious what they are in or what buildings they're in. You probably talked about it at some other point. I just noticed when we were talking about special education that there's 3.5 gifted teachers, and I know there's a kind of a movement or discussion in your gifted and advanced students group, and I just wonder, and this is probably an education question, it's like, is that something that could be, is that could become gifted and advanced teachers, and we start focusing on some of that advanced classes, I'll call them. I don't know what else to call them in special education. The assistant principal is a full-time person under the budget in that function of 2380, I guess it looks like. But I thought she also was the reading person or some other, she does 2 jobs, I thought. And I also am looking, and this is kind of in line with my nurse issue, in that there's 4, and I hope they're not listening, middle school secretaries for 950 students, and there's 4 high school secretaries for like 1,200 students. So it seems like there might be too many at Sandy Run and too few at the high school. That's just a note, because it's based on the student costs. And then when you talked about per pupil costs, where are those building budgets? Where do they end up in the budget? I guess we didn't talk about it today. It might be on some of the line. I just was curious what line that is or what section. Thanks.
Who would like to address, Dr. Wheeler, you have some?
The elementary positions are our instructional support specialists. There will be 1 allocated to each of the elementary buildings. They will be working, they will do some direct intervention with our students, but they're also going to be working as coaches and modeling best practice for our teachers. So 1 per building there. I'm confused somewhat about the gifted teachers. I do know that the gifted committee continues to do their work, understanding this has been a long process. In the time that I've been in the district, we've had 3 people who have chaired or led that committee. So we're talking about expediting that. And I know that's sort of a murky answer. Part of what's happening at the middle school particularly is with the schedule changes that we've instituted, and we're looking at developing 1 section that would be more personalized learning, sort of a different way of approaching. So that's as clear as mud, I understand, but that is something we're continuing to look at. The elementary assistant principal, yes, Kathy Smythe does have that position. She is doing special assignment last year and this year, working, overseeing reading. However, having her also as an AP has been invaluable. There have been several occasions when elementary principals have had to be out of the building for extended time. We pop Kathy in there and she functions as the assistant principal. I would have to defer the question about where in the budget the building budgets are, if you will. And secretarial questions. That would be personnel. I don't have that information right now. Thank you.
As far as the 3.5, that may be because of percentage, going back to the gifted teachers as to how their time is actually allocated. Again, if we're rolling up and reporting how people are charged out in the budget by function. And we may find, and we've had some conversations about what's the best way of reporting. Going to the secretaries, while not everyone in the support staff that's in the building is a secretary. They can be clerical. There are a number of different levels. So the high school has several additional FTEs in different functions other than just secretaries. Is there anything else I should?
And the building budget. As far as the building budgets, that's in different areas, but it's mostly 1,100. And then also 2,250 for the library and 2,380 for the principal. And the high school's 2,390 for graduation.
When we used to see every line item in the budget, that's where you would see the individual buildings. So that's where you would see and get the totals. We used to get that, but, we have a new way of presenting the budget, but that still exists
Oh, yes.
at your level. So it would actually show each building. And so if you total those out and group them, you would,
Right, but it's really not, you don't list it like by Thomas Fitz or Fort Washington. It's based on the account codes. And so each one of the account codes is unique for a building.
Correct.
And so you had the system roll it up based on that.
the account code. Right?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Comments? I think we got them all, Ms. Vitella. So now we'd just like to wrap up. Thank you for participating this evening. Information about future meetings and Sunshine Act. We have our next Finance Committee meeting on Thursday, April 19th, 2018, here in the Cardinal Room following the Operations Committee meeting. We also have a couple of superintendent search focus groups that have had to be rescheduled due to the weather. We have upcoming meetings for parent and guardians on April 3rd at 7 p.m. here in the Cardinal Room. Also on April 5th at 10 a.m., location to be determined, so please see emails or the website for the district at 10 a.m. And at 7 p.m. in the Forum Room, we have focus groups, and those are for I don't have the group listed. Is that for the general? That's general community. That's what I thought. All right. Seeing no other.
Wait, I don't remember an Upper Dublin team ever going to a championship game. I may be wrong, but I don't think we've ever had an Upper Dublin team going to a championship game at States. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the Upper Dublin girls basketball team.
And a very important date they have on Tuesday. Can you
Tuesday
tell us
night, the
time?
date has been changed, Tuesday at 6 p.m. In the land of chocolate. So if you are available, maybe you need to do some shopping for some chocolate. But it's going to be a great game. I know some of us will be there, and we're wishing the Cards the best of luck.
We are, and this is so special that we actually have athletes who are holding off on joining their exchange trips in order to play in this game. So this is going to be magnificent. Wear red and be there. Thank you.
And on that positive note, we shall adjourn. Thank you, everyone.